Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to be talking with another badass today. My friend Rich Diviney, who's a retired Navy SEAL commander. So should be interesting. Hey, Rich, how you doing?
Great. How are you?
I'm good, man. Listen, thank you so much for joining us. I know you're super busy and traveling all over the country doing events, but I appreciate you taking the time to join us.
Oh, listen. I appreciate you having me, and yeah, it's a great opportunity. I love to have great conversations with great people. So thanks for having me.
Sounds good, man. I'm going to do just a brief intro, while everyone's logging on.
Sure.
As I said, we're going to be talking with Rich Diviney today. He's an internationally recognized Special Forces member, leadership expert, public speaker, and best-selling author. As background, Rich is a retired Navy SEAL commander with a career spanning more than 20 years and more than 13 completed overseas deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan. As the commander of a Special Forces unit, Rich has spearheaded the creation of a comprehensive initiative that fused physical, mental, and emotional disciplines. He led his team to create the first ever mind gym, which I thought was fascinating, that helped Special Forces members to train their brains to perform faster, longer, and better in all environments, especially high stress ones. Rich is particularly focused on the idea of discovery, where people realize their potential and then grow towards it. Since retirement, Rich has worked as a speaker, a facilitator, and consultant with the Chapman Leadership Institute. He has taught leadership and optimal performance to more than 5,000 business, athletic, and military leaders, including American Airlines, the San Francisco 49ers, Pegasystems, and Zoom. As background, he's an alum of Purdue University. Sorry about that loss yesterday to Rutgers and that
Oh,
last second shot.
oh my
That was
Lord. Yeah.
tough. I didn't want to bring that up, but that was harsh. Where he got his bachelor's degree in political science, government, and history. And what we're going to talk about today, which I find absolutely fascinating, he is the author of a best-selling book called The Attributes, 25 Hidden Drivers of Optimal Performance, where he breaks down the reasons why certain people perform well in high-stress situations and other people don't, which I think is just a remarkable thing to look at. So simply put, Rich is a leader of people. He's proven that since day one, and he's here to discuss his book and how that's applicable to all of us. So again, Rich, thank you so much for joining us.
No, pleasure to be here, Rick. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So I guess just a little background for people. Just briefly describe what becoming a Navy SEAL entails.
Yeah, so it's the primary training course is a course called Basic Underwater Demolition / SEAL Training, or BUDS for short. It's a 9-month course out. It was run out in San Diego, California, Coronado specifically, and that's where every sailor, whether they be enlisted or officer, goes to see if they have what it takes to be a Navy SEAL, and that's where you get your. Well, that's where all the infamous stories of the hardest training on Earth come from. We do, Hell Week is conducted during that 6 months. It's actually the 5th week of training, where you start on a Sunday and you don't finish until Friday. You get about 2 hours or 3 hours of sleep for the entire week, and yeah, it's about a 85 to 90% attrition rate. Once you graduate BUDS training, and it's morphed a little bit. It's a little bit different than when I went through 20 years ago, 20 plus years ago. In the last decade or so, what happens when you finish BUDS training is you go to what's called advanced training, advanced SEAL training. And that's another 6-month course where you get a little bit more dialed in on some of the more specific SEAL skills. As we're going to talk about, BUDS itself is much more of a selection course than it is a training course. So they added this 6-month advanced training post BUDS for SEAL students to get really trained in the skills that are required to be a Navy SEAL. And then after that, a sailor graduates that, gets their SEAL designator pin, and then goes to a SEAL team and begins to serve.
I mean, what drove you to become a SEAL? Was there a specific event? What kind of drove you to that?
Yeah, there wasn't. I grew up. My dad was a private pilot, so we'd go flying with him on the weekends. My twin brother and I grew up wanting to be pilots, and specifically Navy pilots. We wanted to fly jets off of aircraft carriers, and so we were kind of focused on that even through high school. It was actually during high school, towards the end of high school, the Gulf War happened, and I remember I found out about the Navy SEAL. That's when I first found out about them. And I was just fascinated with these guys, what they did, and kind of it kind of seemed very James Bondish to me. And so we ended up at Purdue University. I was in an NROTC program, and really when it came down to service or selection for what we wanted to choose to do in the Navy, I said to myself, I didn't want to be a pilot and wonder if I could be a Navy SEAL. And so I went for the SEALs, and fortunately I was selected to go to SEAL training, which is hard. It's hard to be selected at first, but then, of course, I was able to get through SEAL training. So yeah, it was really, I found out about, and this was back in I graduated in 1996. No one really knew what SEALs were at all. I mean, it was a very kind of hidden thing. And so my research and the books I was reading said, told me, hey, I want to try this. And 21 years passed, and and actually this January, it'll be 5 years since I actually retired. So it's flown by.
I mean, what an amazing career. They commonly say that the special forces and the SEALs, specifically really require more of a mental fortitude than a physical fortitude. People talk about SEALs and, Hell Week, and you got to be so physically fit, but talk about the importance of mental fortitude and how that relates to physical fortitude.
Yeah, it's such a great point. I mean, it was quite often that the most physically fit guys who would show up, i.e., the Division I athletes or the people who are just like super fit, would quit quite quickly, because SEAL training is really about taking you down to zero, actually below zero, and then asking, what do you have to give now? And so it doesn't really, fitness at that point doesn't matter. But, obviously you have to be, there has to be a baseline, sure. But the whole point is, can you find guys who can really pull out the grit and the drive and what it takes when things are at their lowest and when it feels like you have nothing left. That takes mental fortitude. In fact, everything we do, I mean, you'll agree with this, everything we do comes from the brain anyway. So I mean, all they're doing is they're taking as much away from you as possible to make you as raw as possible. So it's almost 100% mental, because there's only so many push-ups you can do. There's only so many miles you can run. Your body will fail. They'll get you so cold that you can barely talk because your teeth are chattering. And at that point, it's okay, what do you have? What do you got now? And
I got to hear more about this, because I think this is absolutely fascinating. I mean, they take you down to zero or below. Give us the best example specifically of how they break you down to nothing and expect you to bounce back.
Well, I mean, the easiest way to describe it is Hell Week. I mean, you start Hell Week on a Sunday afternoon. You're the first time they let you, and you're doing basically everything you do in SEAL training. So you're running around with big boats on your head. You're exercising with 300-pound telephone poles. You're doing push-ups. You're running on the beach. You're freezing in the surf. I mean, you're doing obstacle courses. Anything they can think of to throw at you, they throw at you. Your first chance to sleep is, I think it was Wednesday, and you only got 2 hours. We only got 2 hours. And then you don't sleep again until Friday. So I mean, we all now know the importance of sleep and how much sleep deficiency affects our physiology, our mental acuity, almost every aspect of our ability to kind of function. And so just that alone is going to take almost all of your athletic prowess and flush it down the toilet. But just aside from that, I mean, again, if you start doing push-ups, I mean, a common occurrence in BUD/S is every time the instructor says drop, you have to drop and do 50 push-ups as a class, in unison counting, right? And so a common occurrence is like drop, and as a class you start counting, and when you get to 49, the instructor will say, someone screwed up, start over. And that'll happen like 10 times, right? So you're literally doing, well, supposedly doing almost 1,000 push-ups in one sitting. No one can do 1,000 push-ups in one sitting. Your body is going to fail at some point, right? So they just take you down to those types of lows. They make you as uncomfortable as possible. Being wet, cold, sandy. You're always sandy. Your skin is rubbed raw, and it's from there you have to then still perform.
Unbelievable. I could talk about that particular stuff all day long because I find that fascinating. But do you feel like that made you into a great leader? Because clearly you have a gift as a leader. Where do you think that your leadership skills came from? Was that innate, or was it SEAL training? What does it do?
Yeah. Well, so first I need to kind of clarify how, really what I talk about in terms of what leadership is. There's a difference between being in charge and being a leader. One is a noun and one is a verb. Leadership is not a position. It's a behavior. We don't get to actually call ourselves a leader. That'd be like calling yourself good looking or funny. All right. It's other people decide whether or not you are someone they want to follow. So as an officer, I was always in charge. It was my behaviors that decided whether or not people designated me as a leader. And I think somehow, and again, even looking back at my career as an officer for 21 years and all the way up to a commanding officer of a SEAL team, I would have to go back and ask the people I was in charge of whether or not they felt I was a leader or I was just the guy in charge. And some of them have, in fact, told me, "Hey, I really love serving with you. I really feel like you are a leader. You're a leader to me." There's probably a ton of people who are just like, hey, he was the guy in charge at the time. So people ask me, are leaders made or are they born? I say neither. They're chosen, right? They're chosen by the people, and they're chosen based on the behaviors, what you do. And I think for me, and I think for anybody, it's a maturation process. You start learning what are those behaviors that allow people to respond to you effectively. And it's not rocket science. I mean, empathy, listening, humility, accountability, decisiveness, those types of things. And those are actually attributes. They're not necessarily skills. And that's really the key. So it's about kind of being in those positions and seeing how you respond to people. And are you creating an environment where people really consider you a leader?
Well, that's a perfect transition into your book, which is The Attributes, 25 Hidden Drivers of Optimal Performance. What was your impetus to write that book? At what point were you like, I got to write this book. I got to share this with the world?
Yeah, so I had been talking because I kind of jumped into the leadership realm, right, with the with the Chapman Co Institute with Simon Sinek. We're talking about leadership, and I had inside of that I was also talking about high performing teams, and so I was talking to a lot of businesses and organizations. They were asking me about high performing teams, and so often they talk about dream teams and these dream teams that they put together, and everything went great when things were going great, but everything would fall apart when things went sideways or the plan didn't go as expected. And so I looked back at what I did in the SEAL teams, and I ran a version of assessment and selection and training for a specialized SEAL command, not the basic one, where I actually started thinking about these things. But the bottom line on this concept is that, when I was in BUDS, I spent hundreds of hours running around with big, heavy boats on my head. I spent hundreds of hours exercising with 300-pound telephone poles and running around those things and freezing in the surf zone. Then I look back at my career and I did hundreds of combat missions overseas. And I will tell you, Rick, never on one did I carry a heavy boat on my head or a telephone pole on my shoulder, right? So what they were doing to us in SEAL training wasn't in fact training us, right? They were putting us into experiences, into environments to tease out these hidden qualities, these attributes, to see if we had what it took. So these attributes are these hidden qualities that define and tell us how we're going to show up. And it's different from skills. And so just to kind of level set, skills are not inherent to our nature. We're not born with the ability to throw a ball or ride a bike or drive a car. Skills direct our behavior in known specific environments. Here's how and when to throw a ball, ride a bike, drive a car. And because they're visible and they're didactic that way, they're very easy to see and therefore very easy to see, assess, measure, and test. You can put scores around them and stats around them. And so we often get seduced by skills when we're building teams because they're so easy to see. That's how we build dream teams without thinking about it. But what skills don't tell us is how people are going to show up when the environment becomes challenging and uncertain and unknown. Because in an unknown environment, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to apply a known skill. This is where we lean on our attributes. Attributes are more innate. We're all born with levels of adaptability, resiliency, perseverance. Of course, they develop over time and experience, but we can see levels of this stuff in small children. Attributes inform the way we're going to show up rather than direct how we show up, right? So my son's levels of perseverance and resilience informed the way he showed up when he was learning the skill of riding a bike, and he was falling off a dozen times doing so. So they inform our behavior. And then because they're hidden in the background, they're very difficult to see and therefore difficult to measure, assess, and test. You see them the most visibly and the most kind of viscerally in times of challenge, uncertainty, and stress when skills can't be applied. And so the book really was a way to describe to businesses. I really felt like, hey, this is stuff that people really know and they want to talk about, but they don't have the verbiage with which to discuss it. And since I had explored this in the SEAL teams, I said to myself, well, this would be something good to write about so people would actually start talking about this. And by talking about it and putting language around it, we can actually start being more proactive about it.
I mean, it's an amazing concept. It's the first book that I've heard about which really covers that. And just to summarize, because people were logging on, basically the book looks into predictors of people who not only are successful, but successful under pressure. Everyone, talks about Tom Brady is the best, 2-minute quarterback, or, Michael Jordan is the best last-minute shot, or there's a high-level lawyer who's great in terms of high-pressure court situation or a high-pressure surgery when you're a surgeon. In your situation, if you could summarize, what do you think is the number one predictor of someone doing well in a stressful situation?
That's a great question. I would say, in the book, I have 5 categories of attributes. I talk about 25 attributes. I put them into 5 categories. Grit is one category, drive is one category, leadership is one category, team ability is one category. The other category is mental acuity. The mental acuity category describes those attributes that really help us understand how we process our world, how our brains process the world. So it's situation awareness, compartmentalization, task switching, and then learnability. I would purport that the most important attributes in stress, challenge, uncertainty are the mental acuity attributes, because it's really how you are processing the information, dealing with your own kind of autonomic arousal levels, and therefore are you able to calm yourself in a way that gets your conscious mind back online, and then interrogate the environment in a way that you can ask questions, pick something to focus on, control that thing, and move through it. So I think the mental acuity attributes are the ones that come first in challenge, stress, and uncertainty.
So let's go over all of those, because I really think they're great. So you've got 5 major categories of attributes which predict success in high pressure situations.
Yeah.
Mental acuity, you said, is the number one predictor. And you said that's task switching, compartmentalization, situational awareness, and learnability. So when the shit hits the fan, so to speak, the ability to kind of calm yourself and not freak out and kind of just think at the highest level. Is that basically what you're saying?
Yeah. So mental acuity, they actually go in order. So first comes situational awareness, right? Situational awareness speaks to our ability to notice things around us in our environment. Obviously, we get about 11 million bits of information per second through our 5 senses. The brain, I think the brain, if I'm correct on this, takes in about 2,500, but we really only process about 40 bits. So the extent to which we're able to notice about our environment speaks to our level of vigilance. And some people have higher vigilance, i.e. higher situational awareness than others. Okay, so first the information comes in, then compartmentalization talks about speaks to our ability to, first of all, assess the information in context of what our goal at the moment is, then prioritize that, what's the most important, and then focus on what we want to focus on. That's compartmentalization. Task switching is our ability to switch focuses and focus points as needed and with efficiency. So we focus on one thing, then we move focus. As you know, multitasking doesn't happen. We can really only focus on one thing at a time. And then learnability is how rapidly we're able to absorb and metabolize the lessons we're learning so that we don't make the same mistakes again. So that would be how I would roll up kind of the mental acuity attributes. They're kind of connected and they go in that order.
Now, next, drive. I think that intuitively makes sense, but you kind of break it down into self-efficacy, discipline, cunningness, narcissism, open-mindedness. Talk about what drive means to you in those 5 categories.
Yeah. So what are the attributes that make up the driven person? And drive really speaks to the ability to set, pursue, and perform through longer duration goals, challenges, and endeavors. Whereas grit really speaks to the ability to perform through the shorter, more acute ones, right? So, but drive are those longer term ones. So those attributes that make up the driven person are self-efficacy. How are we? What's our combination of confidence, initiative, and realistic optimism? Discipline. Can we see the effort through? Open-mindedness is really very important, because you need to be open to your environment and let things in. The closed-minded person it's hard for them to be driven. Cunning, which is not pejorative, it's the ability to see outside perceived rules and boundaries and controls. And then narcissism, which sounds pejorative, but when in the case of drive, narcissism really speaks. So, I mean, narcissism as a term is the desire to stand out, be recognized, be adored. Certainly, to the extreme, it's bad. And there's disorders that talk about how bad it is. But every single human being at some level wants to, at some point, stand out, be recognized, be adored. So that little bit of narcissism in each one of us actually helps us and pushes us to set these audacious goals, right? No, how else would you want to be a Navy SEAL or a surgeon or a author or a rock star, whatever it is? That a healthy metabolized amount of narcissism allows us to set these audacious goals. So those in combination make up the driven person.
Grit, which is the next in line: courage, perseverance, adaptability, and resilience. I think everyone knows what the term grit means. They use it in kind of sentences, but kind of break down what it means when it comes to these attributes.
Yeah, I mean, so in grit, a lot of people use the word grit as an attribute, like as a singular thing. But grit is really the result of a combination of things. And so in this case, it's a combination of these four attributes: courage, perseverance, adaptability, and resilience. These four attributes: courage, the ability to step into our fear, and where we and how from a level of attribute, how easily or less easily our autonomic arousal goes, gets kicked in. But courage is the ability to step into our fear. There cannot be courage. Courage cannot exist without fear. That's neurologically been proven, right? So courage, perseverance is a combination of three attributes. It's a combination of persistence, which is I'm going to try something over and over, the same thing over and over, because I know it's going to work. I'm going to stay at it. That's the stonecutter approach. Tenacity, which is I'm going to try something. If it doesn't work, I'll try something else, kind of the car mechanic approach. And then the mental fortitude to kind of work between those models, because doing all of one or all of the other is probably not going to work. So perseverance is a combination of those three. Adaptability, how easily can I roll with it when the environment changes around me outside my control? And then resilience. So resilience is our ability to bounce back, so bounce back from challenge, return to baseline, but also achievement and return to baseline. Can we, in fact, return to baseline? How easily and how efficiently can we return to baseline when we've been knocked down or lifted up? And that speaks to our levels of resilience.
Now, just from the outside, obviously, I've never been a SEAL. It looks like grit would probably be the number one predictor of someone getting through Hell Week. Do you agree?
I agree, and I'll actually go one further. I think people have asked me to highlight what the most important attributes are, and I'm very reticent to rank them. But if I'm forced, I would say the grit attributes are the most important for people to get through life. We have to. Every single human being has to be gritty in some capacity just to go through life. We really do. We need courage. We need perseverance. We need adaptability. We need resiliency. Certainly most important in SEAL training, but I mean, in terms of getting through this life of ours, grit is top of the heap.
I mean, I think that's such an important kind of moral of the story, that no matter who you are, life is challenging, and it's never just a walk in the park, and you got to be willing to roll with the punches, so to speak, and bounce back and come back stronger. So that's great to hear just from your perspective. Next attribute, leadership. And I think we spoke about this a little bit, so you can kind of go over it quickly. But leadership, what it means, again, it's earned. It's not something you're born with, and really people have to recognize that in you.
Yeah, leadership is behavior, and it's how you behave towards other human beings as to whether or not they choose you as a leader. These behaviors are those attributes, right? So the attributes are empathy, selflessness, authenticity, decisiveness, and accountability. People who behave, when we behave that way towards other people, they tend to look at us as leaders. So that's why those are the leadership attributes.
Lastly, team ability, which again makes sense just from the onset, but you break it down into integrity, conscientiousness, humility, and then humor.
Yeah.
Go over that for us.
Yeah. So again, just like leadership, we don't get to call ourselves good teammates. Other people do. Our teammates do. So it's behaviors that allow them to make that decision about us. Integrity, do the right thing, and do the right thing can be subjective to the group. Do the right thing for a SEAL team might look different than do the right thing for a Cub Scout troop or whatever. So it's do the right thing as in context of the group. Conscientiousness, it's a combination of reliability, your ability to be reliable, work hard, and be diligent in what you do. So it's that combination of those three. Humility, I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Not from a kind of bended knee type humility, but really understanding that we are all on a journey. And even if you've mastered something, you have something to learn, and that you're on a team for a reason, because there are people on the team who do things way better than you do, and you're there to do something way better than someone else does. So you work together. Humility is required to do that. And then humor is the most important, I think, or I guess the most common. I've never seen a high-performing team that doesn't have someone on the team that makes people laugh, and an ability to laugh. Laughing as an unconscious response, because we don't get to control it. It's just like sneezing. It's involuntary. We get juiced with these very powerful chemicals. We get dopamine, endorphins, and oxytocin when we laugh, right? So every time we laugh, we're getting boosted with these things. And those chemicals are basically telling us, hey, keep going. This doesn't feel that bad, and we're in this together. So laughing is a bonding element. So because we get the neurotransmitters and the hormones that do that, and it's so important. It's a hack into some of the courage stuff. And we all know that the teams that can laugh and the people that can laugh are way more effective and way more optimally performing.
So I'm going to go back to something you said at the very beginning, and I think it's important for everyone to hear it again. But the difference between skills, which are like how tall, strong, athletic, smart you are, versus the attributes, which we just talked about, and the importance that the ability to perform under pressure and when the shit hits the fan, so to speak, has nothing to do with skills. It's about your attributes. So the quarterback who has the best arm is not necessarily the best 2-minute quarterback, or the surgeon who has the stillest hands is not necessarily the person you want when there's an issue in the operating room. And the biggest, baddest Navy SEAL is not necessarily the one who's going to get through SEAL training. Talk about the difference between skills and attributes, and just the fact that skills are not really predictors, attributes are.
Well, I guess the best way to put it is that in challenge, uncertainty, and stress, the first thing we have to do as humans moving through something like that is figure out what's going on. That's the first thing we have to do. The only way we figure out what's going on is our attributes. So the attributes come first. And I don't want to downgrade skill. We all actually, the surgeon needs skills, the SEAL needs skills, the quarterback needs skills. But you can't use your skills unless you figure out what's going on first. Otherwise, you're frenetic energy. That's meaningless. So these attributes are really what shape our behavior in a way that allows us to optimally use our skills, right? So the Bradys and the Breezes, they are who they are because, yes, they have the skills, but they also have the attributes to be able to figure out the situation specifically and apply the perfect and right skill in the moment, right? So the way to think about it is that in stress, challenge, and uncertainty, in these unknown environments, those attributes are those things that we're going to lean on first. Here's a great example that everybody can relate to: COVID in 2020. I mean, when that hit and we were all suddenly quarantined, suddenly one morning we wake up, we all have to stay home. Very few of us were performing optimally. Okay, we were all thrown into uncertainty. We all what the heck is going on? Okay, and we all had to begin to figure out. We were all thrown right into our attributes because none of us had any skills to deal with what was going on. So we all basically had to start figuring out the environment before we could then apply skills. So that's the really best way to look at it. They're both important, but when it comes to how humans interact and perform, interact as a team, and how humans perform in all environments, our attributes are coming first, and then our skills come second.
Now, everyone who's listening, I'm sure what they're thinking is, okay, well, people are born with this. Obviously, this guy's a Navy SEAL. He was born with, unbelievable grit and perseverance and everything that you mentioned. Explain how these are developed and these can be learned. You're not born with grit necessarily, and there's ways to develop these attributes.
Absolutely. So we're born with the basic amounts of these, and whatever those basic amounts are. So quickly, for everybody listening, we're all born with all of the attributes. The difference in each one of us are the levels to which we have each, right? So adaptability, if 10 is high and 1 is low, I'm about a level 8 on adaptability. That means when the environment changes around me outside of my control, it's fairly easy for me to roll with it and go with flow. Someone else might be a level 3, which means it's difficult for them, right? There's friction there, right? So we all are born with levels, but developing an attribute you can do, you just can't do it the same way as a skill. And the quick back of the envelope tests to determine whether it's a skill or an attribute, because they get conflated all the time, is to ask yourself, can I teach it or can it be taught, right? So, Rick, you could say to me, hey, Rich, I want to learn how to shoot a pistol and hit a bullseye every time. Well, I could take you out to the range and teach you how to do that within a couple hours, okay? That's a skill. Or you can say, hey, Rich, I want to learn how to be more patient or more adaptable. I can't teach you how to do that, right? So attribute development has to be self-motivated, self-directed, and then it takes a willingness for that person to step into environments that test and tease that attribute. So they're going to be stressful and challenging environments that are outside our comfort zone. If someone wants to develop their patience, they must go find environments inside of which they have to practice patience, right? So whether that looks like, it might be I'm going to drive in traffic, I'm going to stand at the longest line in the grocery store. I always say having kids, that's a great way to develop it. So attribute development is absolutely good. And even, I mean, SEALs, I would say I certainly was probably given some of these core attributes that helped me get through SEAL training, but nothing's to say. I mean, there was developmental things that happened all along the way before I even got to SEAL training that allowed me to eventually be successful and maximize those capabilities. So we can always develop attributes. We just have to do it ourselves. We can't make anybody do it.
Something else that you've been quoted as saying, and I thought it was interesting, is that people strive for peak performance, but instead people should strive for optimal performance. Explain the difference.
Yeah, peak is kind of the word of the last several years. Everybody wants to peak everything, peak this, peak that. Peak is an apex. That's all it is. And from an apex, you can only come down. There's only one way you can go, and that's down. Peak has to be planned for, scheduled, and prepared for, right? So the professional football player spends his entire week planning and prepping and eating in the right way so that he may peak on Sunday for 3 hours, all right? Optimal performance is different. Optimal performance is, how can I do the very best I can in the moment, whatever the best looks like in the moment, okay? So sometimes the best looks like peak. It looks like, hey, everything's clicking, there's flow states, everything's cool. Sometimes our best is, hey, I am head down, grinding it out, going step by step, because that's all I got. And it's dirty, and it's ugly, and it's painful. That is still optimal performance, because that's the best you can do in the moment. That's what the best looks like. So optimal performance allows us a couple things. It allows us to first reward ourselves for those times when we are grinding it out, and it's ugly and it's dirty, but we're still performing optimally, okay, the best we can at the moment. But it also allows us to start looking at energy expenditure in a much more responsible and healthy way. I don't need to be peak when I'm driving to the grocery store, okay? I can manage my energy, and this is what Navy SEALs actually specialize in. We are optimal performers because we're constantly managing our energy. I'd be on helicopters on the way into combat with my guys, right? In a helicopter ride into combat, and the guys around me, a lot of them were like napping or listening to music, right? It wasn't, people think of these like, we're like a football team, you're like, rah, 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 really loud and like chanting. No, we are completely calm, right? Because we don't know what's coming. We don't know how long we're going to be out there. We don't know what we're going to have to put out. So we are always managing our energy in ways that allows us to peak on demand and grind it out when we need to. But that is optimal performance. So it's a kind of an energy management and a way to look at performance in a much healthier, much more responsible way.
Listen, Rich, I'm going to wrap it up because it's been half an hour and I know you're super busy. I could honestly talk to you all day. Amazing kind of seeing what makes you tick. You're obviously just an incredible leader, incredible role model, an example of what happens when you're focused and you have discipline and all the hard work you've done. Congrats on everything you've done for this country, all that you're still doing for this country. And for everyone out there, buy the book, The Attributes. It's honestly incredible. Talks about, like we did, everything we talked about here, how to have, optimal performance in high stress situations. Doesn't matter what you do for a living, but it's applicable to everyone. So again, Rich, thank you so much for your time. Truly an honor.
Well, thank you, Rick. I look forward to keeping in touch. Thanks for having me.
Awesome, bud. Take care. Have a great weekend.
Thank you. You too.